And one of the most valuable things that the PhD gave me was the ability to go and do archival research and be in the physical presence of someone else's creative process. That was just, I'll be forever grateful for that. But at the Mutter Museum, I had the capacity to work with these texts as both a scholar and a creative. And it was game changing like that. The last half of Calenture is a suite of poems called An Elementary Treatise on Human Anatomy that were inspired by the archives at the Mutter Museum. The title, Calenture, is actually a 19th century medical diagnosis, and it's specifically a tropical fever that afflicted sailors who suffered from a very specific hallucination. They saw the sea as a green field, and they would leap overboard and drown because their desire for that grassy mirage was so great. And you can imagine the Whitmanian correlations that I found there. And
Yeah, the grass. Yes.
really interesting moments in my own biography. Like the first time I read the word, I'm sitting in the reading room at the Mutter Museum, and I was reading about, stumbled across this in a book of 19th century medical diseases, like a sort of encyclopedia. And I had this vision of my sister, my late sister Amanda, diving from the cliffs into this lake called Katawa near where we lived. And that particular summer, there was an algal bloom, so the water was incredibly green. And I'm just sort of arrested by this image, and I knew that that would become a book in that moment. At the time that I was there, the Mutter Museum had an extraordinary director, Robert Hicks, who's become a phenomenal mentor and dear friend of mine. And he was extraordinary in opening the collections to artists, to writers, to filmmakers. And not only that, he would take Civil War medical kits and go to public schools in inner city Philadelphia and do a Civil War medical clinic. So he'd give the students a list of symptoms, and they got to be, the soldier with gangrene who's going to need his arm amputated, or with dysentery. He would have hospital day at the museum where he would turn the museum into a hospital and bring all these students in. He was about breaking down those borders. In the last 6 months, for reasons that are baffling and mysterious to many of us who have loved that institution, the CEO, who's just stepped down, and the new director are trying to close the museum to anyone but doctors. They've removed the entire YouTube channel. They've removed many of the specimens that were donated by people with an intention and a bequest that people learn from these specimens. So there's a real sense of a kind of inversion of what you and I are talking about, of going from an institution that is so open. And there's a real sense, it's something else that I think is so important to both you and I, which is a sense of the body's transcendence, the body's capacity for, a kind of Whitmanian ecstatic grace. And how we come to that is always an encounter with our mortality. So many people talk about, people who've worked in the museum talk about people coming there when they've gotten a cancer diagnosis. I myself went there with my best friend who had survived brain cancer, and sat there or stood there looking at the brain specimens and looking at her. And it's one of the most profound moments of my life, So it's an institution that can have such a profound impact on people. And yet we're going into this place of closing off, as opposed to, rant over.
No. This is so just poignant, and palpably I can feel that pain in your voice. I mean, it's what I thought when the Met Art Museum decided that they were going to now stop the pay what you wish unless you're a New York resident. And I thought, so if you're in New Jersey, now you have to pay the set fee. Connecticut, it just did not. And I think that any pay what you wish, it brought in so many Like I would even just go to the art museum for an hour and be like, well, I paid $5 and I just want to see this one room. And
Mhm.
now, you know, not even just because of that, you know, change in decision because I can pay what I wish. I'm a New York resident, but I want to take friends. And then I realize, wait, no, they're now limited by the pay. And I understand boards make decisions and there's financial issues right now with keeping these institutions alive. But I just wish there was a like you've said, why can't we have a collective vision of these organizations? And that saddens me to hear about the Mutter Museum because it's a place that so many of my friends and anyone in the Philly area rave about it. I mean, it's up there with one of my favorite museums. I mean, Philly, I was back in Philly recently, Lindsay, and I was in Society Hill and Head House Square, one of my favorite neighborhoods. Like
Yeah.
anyone who's out there who's like, near Philly or goes to Philly, I always say Old City, Society Hill, Queen Village, Washington Square West,
Mhm.
journeying to Rittenhouse. There's
Mhm.
just such a heart in Philly. And it's there in New York, but it's like I call it the little sibling to New York. It like has all New York's charm, but it's just concentrated. And you
That's
always
such
talk
a
to
good
new
way to
people.
say it. Yeah.
Like they're just so friendly. I mean, New Yorkers are friendly too, but I think it's just so neighborhoody. And
It,
yeah. Yeah. It's well, I hope that the Mutter Museum, I'm assuming there's a lot of pressure on them now from
yeah, so I'll say
those
a
like
couple of
you.
important things about that. The first one is that the campaign Protect the Mutter, find them on Instagram. There's a petition via their Instagram. You'll be able to get to that petition. It's already got 30 something thousand signatures. There have been articles in the Washington Post, the Guardian, the New York Times, all the major Philadelphia newspapers and media outlets. And the CEO has stepped down as a result of it. That happened just last week. So I'm certainly no expert. I've been watching this from afar with great trauma. But the friends of the Mutter, the Mutter kind of cohort of morbidly curious um, people are definitely all over it. So, anyone who's concerned can find them that way. And I think there's room for optimism for sure.
Yes. And it's also why I feel like a good future vision is when museums have joined forces and you can be a member to multiple museums. Like they're
Mhm.
reciprocal. I've gone to the Mount, Edith Wharton's home, in the Berkshires. Have you been there, Lindsay?
No.
Oh, that's a
And
place that
she's my
you'll,
favorite 19th century novelist, so I need to
yes,
go.
yes. They have a writer's residency. Um, yeah, you have to add it to your list. So what I love is they're also part of like the Nassau County Art Museum that's near me and all of these museums. They've all joined like the North American Reciprocal Organization. That's not exact NARM. Yeah, I think it's North American Reciprocal Museums. But I hope that that's our future because I feel that these places need to join forces. And that's actually brings us back to academia, which is they need to join forces with writers and artists and performers and media people like to just I always say not every academic needs to start a podcast nor um needs to put themselves out there if they're uncomfortable. Like I never have a dictum like you need to do exactly this venue because you open yourself up to criticism and the social media space, which, I get naysayers, but I'm also ready for this. Um, and I'm sure, Lindsay, something I did want to ask as we're nearing our end, which I'm always going to talk with you on our off time here.